Night was Sarah's favorite time of day. The world was quiet. The darkness felt peaceful.
I like to sit by my window, listening to the crickets chirp. Sometimes an owl hoots in the distance.
Sarah loved old things. She collected vintage radios. She found them in antique shops. She liked their wood and metal cases. Their dials and knobs fascinated her.
One day, I found a special radio. It was tucked away in a dusty corner. The radio was made of dark wood. It had a silver speaker grill. It looked beautiful. I knew I had to have it.
That night, Sarah sat in her chair. She turned the radio's knob. Static filled the air. She moved the dial. The static crackled. Sarah hoped to find a lost radio signal. She listened closely. The static shifted. Sarah heard a voice. It was faint and muffled. It seemed to come from far away. The voice was desperate. It was calling for help.
Help me, please, someone, anyone.
Sarah leaned closer to the radio. She turned up the volume. The voice became clearer. It was a man's voice. He sounded scared.
My name is Henry. I'm trapped. I need your help.
Where are you?
The voice gave her an address.
Find the abandoned mansion. There's a journal. It will tell you how to help me.
The address led Sarah to the edge of town. An old, overgrown driveway led to a mansion. It stood on a hill, dark and imposing. The windows were boarded up. The paint was peeling. The air felt heavy and cold. Sarah parked her car and got out. The wind howled through the trees. The branches looked like skeletal fingers against the moonlit sky. Sarah took a deep breath and started up the driveway.
Hurry, please!
Sarah reached the front door. It was massive and made of dark wood. The handle was cold to the touch. She pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, as if it hadn't been opened in years. Inside, the mansion was dark and dusty. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling. The air was thick with the smell of decay. Sarah shivered. The radio felt cold in her hand.
The journal, it's in the library.
Henry's voice whispered. Sarah walked deeper into the house. She found the library. Bookshelves lined the walls. They were filled with old leather-bound books. A fireplace stood at the far end of the room. Above the fireplace was a portrait of a man. He had a sad face and piercing eyes. Sarah felt like he was watching her. She searched the room for the journal. Suddenly, she heard a noise. It was a soft whisper coming from the hallway. Sarah froze. She listened intently. The whisper came again. It sounded like Henry's voice, but fainter. It seemed to be coming from upstairs.
Henry?
Sarah called out. There was no answer, only silence. Sarah decided to ignore the whisper. She had to find the journal. She continued searching the library. Finally, she found it. The journal was hidden behind a row of books. It was bound in leather, just like the others. But this one had Henry's name etched on the cover. Sarah opened the journal and began to read. The handwriting was messy and faded. As she read, she learned about Henry's life in the mansion. He wrote about a secret room. He wrote about a darkness that consumed him. Suddenly, the radio crackled loudly. Henry's voice cried out in terror. Then, silence. The radio went dead. Sarah looked up. The portrait above the fireplace was different. The man in the painting was smiling cruelly. His eyes seemed to glow. A cold wind swept through the library. Sarah felt a presence behind her. She turned around slowly. The library was empty, but she could feel something watching her. It was a cold, malevolent presence, and it was getting closer. Sarah backed away, fear gripping her heart. She dropped the journal and ran. She ran out of the library, out of the mansion, and into the night. She didn't stop running until she reached her car. She jumped in and slammed the door. She fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking. As she started the car, she glanced back at the mansion. A figure stood in the doorway. It was tall and shadowy. Sarah thought she saw a cruel smile in the darkness. Then, the figure was gone. Sarah drove away from the mansion, never looking back. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something evil had followed her home. The radio on the passenger seat remained silent. Sarah was never seen again.